Ayan, kamusta kayo dyan? Good evening everyone. I hope you had a fantastic day, especially catching up with the latest commentaries and discussions about ito. Pinakapaborito pa natin na topic, confidential intel funds pa more. Sana all, sana all, sana all. Medyo malaki-laki po ang allocation ng intelligence, super intelligent, confidential, very transparent funds dito sa upcoming national budget natin. Obviously, with the State of the Nation address, the second State of the Nation address of President Marcos Jr. over, now we're gonna get down to the business of budget, no? Allocation of budget. Nagbigay na po ng general direction, blueprint, vision for the year, sets of priorities ang ating minamahal na Pangulo. So now it's up to our legislators, no, to our Congress to determine saan pupunta ang pera. And of course, this will be in one way or another coordinated with the Department of Budget and Management. And one of the items na pinag-usapan ngayon, of course, is yung size of the confidential intelligence funds for the 2024 fiscal year national budget. Obviously, mahalaga yan, not because of only yung concern natin with transparency, with good governance, kamusta naman ang anti-corruption initiatives ni Pangulong Marcos Jr. We're still waiting for updates on that so far. But the other thing also to keep in mind here is, eto na nga we keep on hearing that kulang yung budget natin for para sa depensa ng ating bansa, no? Ating karagatan dyan sa West Philippine Sea, kulang daw yung budget para sa AFP modernization, etc. So we wanted to get down to business here and talk about some of the things that we really have to prioritize. And that's why, over the past 24 hours or so, mga ka-Hidarians, ka-Spacers, mga ka-YouTubers, one of the things that we keep on hammering on is the necessity to do something about what's happening, especially sa Second Thomas Shoal or yung Ayungin Shoal, because we have a very precarious presence there. And katulad ng explanation natin kahapon, napakamahalaga itong position ng Second Thomas Shoal or Ayungin Shoal. It is really at the crossroads between Calayan Group of Islands, Palawan, and it's well within our exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. So mahalaga yan. It's very, very important. And precisely because of the importance ng Ayungin Shoal and Second Thomas Shoal, we made somehow an effort back in the day, in the late 1990s, to at least ground the ship, a World War II Sierra Madre ship there, and then naglagay tayo permanently throughout the decades, more than 2 decades, ng mga Philippine Marines. Now, I had the pleasure of giving lecture dun sa Philippine Marines a few years ago, and one of the things that I was reminded of by them was that sila actually yung talagang nagbabantay dyan, no? Of course, kausap po natin yung Philippine Navy, kausap po natin Philippine Army, Philippine Air Force, all of them. Lahat po sila mga patriots, nagko-contribute dito sa pagdepensa sa ating soberania. But really, it's the Philippine Marines, guys, who are there on the ground, and in this case, on a rusted, horrible-looking ship, no? Talagang Mad Max apocalyptic-looking ship for more than 2 decades. So since 1999, we're looking at almost a quarter of a century since we have had this supposed provisional, and very perilous presence dito sa Ayungin or Second Thomas Shoal. Kaya hindi tayo dapat magtataka na hindi tayo nire-respeto ng mga ibang karibal natin dyan, most especially of course China. Because it's very easy for China to paint our presence there, although they have no business of being there, they have no basis, no legal basis to have any claim there. Madali para sa kanila sabihin na tayong nagsisquatter, even if sa sarili natin bakuran yan. Now, just to be clear, I'm not raising this issue because I want to put the current administration in the negative light. No, the current administration is doing its own job, right? We can just look at the whole logo business and love Philippines. You can draw your own conclusions. No, we're not here to do that. In fact, the issue of the Philippines not doing enough on the ground is something that I've been raising for quite some time, including ito yung mga mga ka-unity, mga dyan, mga DDS, kamusta naman kayo dyan, yung mga hindi nagbabasa, yung mga hindi tinitignan, yung mga sinusulat natin. I have been raising this issue for quite some time. I even raised this back in the day with the Aquino administration people, right? Including the ex-foreign secretary. So if you look at this article I wrote back in 2015 pa ito, no? for Asian Maritime Transparency Initiative, I very explicitly said the Philippines has a lopsided strategy sa West Philippine Sea. In short, medyo kapos, medyo hilaw, medyo hindi balance because ang daming sinasabi dun sa international law, ang daming sinasabi dun sa arbitration award. I've written a lot about bakit the arbitration award was important because it provides a legal pretext for other countries to challenge China's claims. It makes it harder for China to even mention the 9-dash line, which they haven't been mentioning. It makes it easier for the US and other countries na magpapadala ng mga naval warships for freedom of navigations or related operations, access operations. So, maraming silbi yung arbitration award. But that alone was never enough. Again, the principle of necessary but not sufficient, right, applies. I said, panon pa lang ni Pinoy, sabi ko, kulang yan. There has to be something done on the ground. So 1999 pa lang, we had this rusty ship grounded there. Okay, no one made an effort kahit kulayan yan na mabuti. I don't know about its latest status. So the pictures we have there is from that piece, Minnow versus Shark, ng New York Times a few years ago. But I'm not very certain that the situation has dramatically improved, especially during the pandemic years, considering how the previous administration handled the situation here in mainland Philippines, right? So, kung titignan mo yan, for a very long time, for the past decade, in multiple writings, I've emphasized na kapos talaga at may imbalance dito sa strategy natin because we're good in diplomacy or legal strategy. At it's during Aquino, ibang usapan na kay Tatay Digong. By the way, speaking of Tatay Digong, kamusta naman ang kanyang special envoy? Ayan, nagmahal, nag-travel, biglang na water cannon yung mga ating Philippine Coast Guard. Okay. Alam nyo na, di ba? Kung napakagaling naman talaga yung special envoy natin, bakit ganyan naman nangyari? Anyway, so what I'm saying is Aquino time pa lang sinasabi ko yan. And my question was, why didn't the Aquino administration deal with this issue since na-inherit yan from era pa yan eh. Di ba? Era pa yan. Now, the explanation/excuse I got was, no, hindi tayo pwede gumawa ng mga on-the-ground, blah, 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 because that will undermine our moral ascendancy in blah, 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 in international court. Like, that's nonsense. That's totally nonsense. No offense to our great friends, but that's nonsense. If you look at the on clause, it's very clear. Pag you unilaterally change the nature of disputed land features, illegal po yan. Right? But we're not building fake islands there, right? Or dun sa Pag-asa, making our facilities better there doesn't change the nature of the disputed island. It doesn't. In fact, it's even questionable whether it's an island per the definition of United Nations Convention Law of the Sea. So legally speaking, that argument is very flimsy. And second, moral ascendance, ano to, Mr. Congeniality contest. So as much as I've been very critical of this friends to all, enemy to none, mga patourism level na national security doctrine, foreign policy doctrine, I was also very critical of this kind of a moral ascent. No. This is brutal realpolitik. They're scrambled on the ground. The Vietnamese, they're making facilities right and left. They're also deploying military assets there. The Malaysians have a beautiful resort dun sa layang-layang. They have naval squadrons positioned there. Kung tinignan mo yung mga isla ng Vietnam and Malaysia, never mind Taiwan, never mind China na NBA level, na next level na few kilometers long yung airstrip pa lang nila, mapapayak ka talaga na bakit mga squattering sa atin? Well, this is well within our exclusive economic zone. It's not even an island. It's not even a rock. It's a low tide elevation. It cannot even be claimed as a territory. Right? Bakit ganyan yung position and position natin? So, no, this was not about just a single administration or two. This is about all administrations since, and this is where things get interesting. Again, no fan of dictators, no fan of corrupt dictators. But if there's one thing that we got right when we had a full-blown dictatorship, no, Duterte was not a full-blown dictator. Anyone with a sound mind knows that you don't classify him as a dictator. He was authoritarian populist, no question about it, but not dictator. I'm talking about, of course, Marcos Sr. Now, if you look at Marcos Sr., it was really during his time that there was an effort by the Philippines to build state-of-the-art, back in the day, facilities. Isa dyan yung Pag-asa. We built this, mga kameta, back in the 1970s pa natin ginawa yan. We were way ahead of the curve. Ginawa pa natin nun. And yet, year after year after year, in fact, decades after decades and after decade, there was no follow-through on that. In fact, if you want to see more details, please check out my interview with Dr. Attorney Professor Batong Bakal of University of the Philippines College of Law. We talked about yung kasaysayan, no, ng Philippines efforts to consolidate yung position natin sa West Philippine Sea. And dito, this is one of the areas that Marcos Sr. got it right. There was a vision. There was a long-term appreciation. There was a long-term strategy. There was a degree of coherence. There was funds invested into a strategic vision. The technology that we had to employ in the 1970s to build this airstrip, right? And then, tingnan niyo yung itsura niya in more recent years. Parang, parang dilapidated, abandoned airport in the middle of nowhere, right? So, this is not how it's supposed to look like. So, administration after administration, palpak. Hindi ginawa yung kanilang trabaho. In fact, I raised this issue with no less than the late President Ramos also, because I felt of all Filipino presidents in recent decades, he had the most strategic vision, or at least sophistication in terms of strategic thinking. But the excuses I got is kulang sa fund, priorities, etc. Okay, I'll give Ramos a break because he had to recover the Philippines from the coups and all the destabilization and instabilities we had in the 1980s. Pero naman ang excuse ng mga sumunod na administrations, right? So at least paano ni ERAP, yung grounded ship ang nilagay natin sa ayungin. But I mean, come on guys, this is a joke. And this is important because we keep on getting this discussion about wala tayong funds, wala tayong pera, etc. Well, guess what? First of all, we have passed a law, the revised AFP Modernization Act, more than a decade ago, which actually mandates our government to allocate a significant fund annually to developing our basic defensive capabilities to achieve what we call in the defense lingo as minimum deterrence or minimal credible deterrence capability. No? So, ito po yung budget allocation supposedly at least between 2019 to 2028. So, we were supposed to have a steady increase dito sa ating defense spending with the hope that more and more of this additional spending goes into acquiring 21st century defensive capabilities. I'm talking about Generation 4.5 or at the very least, upgraded versions of Generation 4 fighter jets. Wala pa tayo niyan. F-16 fighters, for instance, right? Now upgraded. I'm talking about some sort of missile defense capability. Medyo we have done better than that in terms of BrahMos missile systems. I'm talking about more advanced frigates and corvettes. We're not there yet, but we're kind of moving in that direction. So, we're still behind the curve. We're barely in the third horizon. Now, President Marcos Jr., by the way, this was introduced by Aquino II, right? By Benigno Aquino III. Aquino II, I mean second Aquino president. In 2011, so by 2012, pumasok na ito. So, thank you kay Aquino and thank you kay Duterte for allocating funds. We're talking about billions of dollars to this. Kaya nga medyo may konting improvement na sa ating mga basic capabilities. But we're still way behind the curve. And the pandemic and the shambolic way by which the previous administration handled the pandemic, of course, undermined our ability to push this along its schedule. But President Marcos said that on track naman dapat tayo dito sa Horizon 3 whereby we have to focus more on our Air Force and all. So this is what the President said earlier this year. Sabi niya, AFP modernization is on track, meaning we're moving towards developing minimum deterrence capability. But the fact of the matter is, you're also hearing more and more people saying that kulang tayo sa funds, kulang tayo sa ganito, kulang tayo sa ganyan. And I think that's where the issue of all of these funds come from. The Maharlika Sovereign Wealth Fund, again, many real decent economists will tell you, I'm not sure we really need something like that, or I'm not sure this is the best time to come up with something like that. And then there's the issue of confidential funds. Now, when it comes to Intel funds, let's first discuss the issue. Let's be fair. Again, diba? Alam naman, mga Kaidarians, we're fair. Let's discuss the issue as it is. So, ayon sa ating minamahal na gobyerno, ito po yung mahal naman talaga natin eh. Mahal natin, especially kung competent. Right? May ibang usapan na kung talaga. Okay. Let's talk Intel funds. Okay. So, ito. So, ating Department of Budget Secretary has said that, we're moving towards increase in confidential funds. Nasaan yung glasses ko? So, ayon kay Budget Secretary Amana Pangandaman, she revealed the other week that three agencies of the Department of Information and Communication Technology, Anti-Money Laundering Council, and the Presidential Security Group requested an increase in their confidential intelligence fund. Meron pong increase na 120 million for the CIF, no? So may increase na po. So what we're looking at is this. Ito again, these are just facts out there. You can read it on your own. This is what we're looking at. Wala tayong pera, di ba guys? Kawawa naman tayo, wala tayong pera. But, now, let me just be very clear. I have absolutely no problem, Philippine Coast Guard, AFP, yung mga, security agencies who have an obligation to protect us to have intelligence fund. They need that. It's a given, right? Just look at China's, but biglang picture ko from North Korea ang lumabas dito. So I have absolutely no problem whatsoever with security agencies getting intelligence fund if it's for the purpose of defending the country, right? Making sure that there's a counter-espionage activities, there's also intelligence gathering to know what our karibals. Pero di ba, we're friends to all, enemy to none. Bakit pa natin kailangan ng army? Bakit pa natin kailangan ng intelligence? Di ba, friends naman natin lahat. Okay, now going back to this. No, seriously speaking, of course we need money for intelligence fund and all. So, but this is it. As much as I'm 100% for our security agencies getting intelligence fund, we know that the intelligence funds are not just going to the intelligence agencies, whose very job is to protect everyone, including the president, the vice president, and all key institutions of the state, right? So the office of the president alone is already asking for 4.56 billion, almost 4.6 billion pesos in confidential intelligence fund for the 2024 National Expenditure Plan, right? Which the Department of Budget and Management formally submitted to the House of Representatives the other day. Okay? Now, in fairness naman kay Pangandaman, sinasabi niya, the percentage naman is not changing that much. Because if you look at the percentage of budget, it actually peaked in 2018 at 0.2%, and now it's going to be at 0.17%. So lower daw as a percentage. But in absolute terms, of course, it's increasing. So that's the argument that the Department of Budget Management is making. The other argument they're making is that, well, it is confidential, but it's still, right? It's still subjected to certain protocols or SOPs on how confidential funds are allocated and justified, right? So it's not totally non-transparent. That's the argument they're making. Nevertheless, there are many critics who are saying why, for instance, not only the office of the president, but the office of the vice president is also getting so much intelligence funds. No? So these are some of the questions that are being raised. Sana all, di ba? Lahat na lang, bigyan na lang intelligence fund. Baka kailangan din ng DPWH kasi di ba, kailangan natin protektahan yung mga projects natin. Baka naman. Baka kailangan din natin bigyan ng ano pa. Alam niyo na, di ba? I mean, every department can come up with a reason to have their own intelligence fund. Right? Because all departments need to protect themselves against mandanakaw, against threats, etc. But anyway, so the Office of the Vice President defended the 150 million confidential fund. Sabi nila, mahalaga yan because when you talk about education, it's intertwined with national security, right? So because the education is intertwined with national security, napakahalaga na we mold children who are patriotic, children who will love our country, who will defend our country. Okay, fantastic, great. By its nature, it's confidential fund, so we cannot discuss kung paano siya ginagamit sa operations. Like, wow, interesting. So, wag na natin pag-usapan. Now, of course, some people have raised issues with this because, of course, everything is intertwined with national security. Infrastructure build-up is intertwined with national security. Agriculture development is intertwined with national security because insurgency, in one way or another, has to do with lack of infrastructure development, inclusive development, etc. But the other, of course, argument is that why the previous vice president didn't have any intelligence fund, and she seemed to be able to get by and get to do her job, especially with a very limited budget. Of course, ibang usapan pa yung budget of OVP. She was able to help a lot in terms of the pandemic relief operations, etc. So, in 2019, duly elected Vice President Leni Robredo actually criticized the Duterte administration back then for use of intel funds. At ayon sa kanila, wala silang intel funds, which is something that had to be confirmed with the Commission on Audit. And as far as you know, multiple occasions the Commission on Audit made it clear that pagdating sa transparency and accountability, the OVP under the previous administration of Lenny Robredo, I mean, talking about the OVP administration, was top of the charts, no? Uh, so yeah, so you can check it on your own. You can also look at the COA report, for instance. So they were not just criticizing; they were embodying what they were talking about under previous administration. So, yun nga eh. So, my point is, we seem to have a lot of money for a lot of things, including millions for logos, hundreds of millions for rebranding. We seem to have billions of pesos for intel and confidential fund for non-security agencies or non-primary security agencies. I mean, of course, we have to protect our president. I'm 100% for that. Of course, we have a very great president who travels a lot. He has to be well protected. I understand that. Many people love him, 31 million and more. I get it. But my point is, sana naman siguro medyo mag-focus din tayo dun sa mga ahensya at mga institutions sa ating estado na who are actually made for the very purpose of defending our country. Yung ating karagatan, ating mga officials, ating estado. So, we have to make sure that we meet our budget commitments when it comes to defense spending. Not only dun sa pension and sahod, but actually in terms of acquiring strong enough weapon systems para hindi tayo mabubuli. Again, the strategy here is porcupine. We're not here na tapatan ng China yung mga ganun. Of course, hindi natin matapatan na, on a one-to-one basis or head-to-head count. No, this is about having minimum credible defensive capabilities. Pwede tayo magiging poison shrimp, as Lee Kuan Yew famously put it. And siguro naman, a few million pesos could go a long way of at least pipunturahin naman natin itong mga kawawang natin, yung mga position natin dyan sa Ayungin Shoal sa West Philippine Sea. Para hindi naman mukhang squatter, di ba? Para re-respetuhin naman tayo sa sarili natin bakuran, di ba? If it's ours, then let's show that it's ours. And let's show that we appreciate our own people, because these are the people who really need the funds. They're at the very front line. There's no need even to explain ano yung entwined, whatever. No, it's clear as daylight. Or not so daylight because sa sobrang rusty and dark itong ship na ito, hindi mo na makita. So, aside from anti-tetanus and other kinds of aid, I think kailangan talaga at least pipinturan yan. Now, obviously, this is a major strategic issue. Dahil sa kapalpakan ng mga sunod-sunod na administration, so it's unfair to just blame Marcos on that. Bago pa lang si Marcos, at least relatively. Anong ginawa ni Digong? Anong ginawa ng mga dating administration before Digong para ayusin itong sitwasyon ng ating mga Marines, no? Ating mga sundalo dyan sa Ayungin Shoal. At hindi rin ganun kaganda yung sitwasyon natin sa mga ibang isla. Yung Pag-asa medyo pinaganda nila Lorenzana, God bless his soul, God bless him. Of course, God bless him and God bless all of the patriots that we have had. And God bless also the Aquino administration for getting the ball rolling. So some good things happen, but still, kulang talaga tayo, especially dito sa Ayungin Shoal. And it's not like just China. Babastusin din tayo ng mga ibang bansa kung ganyan lang style natin, di ba? Hindi tayo, will not be taken seriously. Again, you don't need billions of dollars to deal with these things. It's just some basic maintenance and construction we can get and get the ball rolling. But there is also a major strategic issue here. Because ang China ngayon, the very China that built all of those Mall of Asia size fake islands is telling us, umalis na kayo dyan kasi squatter lang kayo, di ba? Well, the price we pay for having presidents who are not very good. The thing though is, we have other options. Not only, kasi, may mga allies tayo eh. May mutual defense treaty tayo eh. Very clear in US na kung atakein, hindi lang water spray, water cannon, pero kung atakein coercively, fire shots, etc., ma-activate ang MDT. So one option for the Philippines is to leverage the MDT with the US to go for massive, not massive, but at least decent base building dyan. Some sort of platform around this vessel, right? Or some sort of platform around that. And this could be protected by our allies and all. Again, that's gonna be a kind of an escalation. But it's not like, ito kasi yung problema kang late to the party ka. Because the Vietnamese, the Malaysians, the Taiwanese, and especially the Chinese at the next level. Kasi hanggang PBA level lang, barangay level, basketball lang, PBL lang, ang militarization ng Vietnam, no? Or Taiwan. Yung kay China, NBA level na yan. Hindi Summer League, talagang NBA na yan. So we're late to the party. So now suddenly, pag we do something about this, tayo pang i-akusa na provocative. But that's the price you pay for not being proactive. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean we'll just sit idly by and let, essentially rotten rusty sinking vessel from Second World War be our marker of sovereignty. I mean, that's a ridiculous situation. It's embarrassing. It's optically, it's a visual pollution if you look at it, and it's immensely demoralizing, and in many ways it's an insult sa ating mga patriots, sa ating mga Marines who are defending us. So something has to be done about this. And I don't buy the argument na wala tayong pera. That's nonsense. Marami tayong pera for funds, for logos, for branding, for Maharlika, etc. You just need a few $1,000,000 and you can make something big here. And now that Marcos is pushing for more EDCA, more alliance with the US, cooperation, blah, 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 then maybe it's also time to seriously discuss if we can leverage our alliance to be allowed to improve facilities in areas that we already control, albeit in an ugly, visually, pollution, whatever way, right? But we control this area. Make it very clear, as the Americans have also made it clear, pag atakein tayo during their supply or reconstruction mission, then we can activate the Mutual Defense Treaty. In fact, when Secretary Lorenzana was visiting Pag-asa on several occasions, and when we were trying to improve our facilities sa Pag-asa, binabuli din tayo from neighboring areas where the Chinese are positioned, no? But we persisted, we held our ground, and there was always a shadow of potential US intervention. So we got it through. So my sense is this has to be next. And this is not going to be the end of the story. Marami rin tayong mga threats na emerging dyan sa kabila, sa Philippine Benham-Rice area, Philippine Sea Benham-Rice area. So we have to solidify, strengthen our position on the ground there throughout different areas, because wala nang time for clown show, amateur hour, lack of vision. No. This is a scramble. Hindi ito biro. 100% in ang China, 100% in ang Vietnam, very serious ang Malaysia, very serious ang Taiwan. Lahat ng ating mga, Brunei lang siguro ang hindi, yung Brunei sa sobrang yaman at late na wala na silang pake doon sa mga claim nila eh. But we are facing very determined opposition and rivals here. China of all, of course, NBA level, and then at the PBA level, we have Vietnam and Taiwan, and then PBL level, we have Malaysia. So, hindi tayo pwede purong puso lang. Kailangan ng diskarte, kailangan ng tapang, kailangan ng galing. And this is what we want to see from our president. Now, in fairness, at the very least, what President Marcos has said so far is that there was no agreement, or if there is, or there were for that matter, wala, hindi mangyayari yan, which is, because some were saying, obviously, you know who are these people who are saying this. By the way, saan si Tatay Digong? Wala pa siyang di ba ang tapang-tapang niya? Di ba kamusta ang jet ski natin? Sabi naman ni Marcos Jr., wala naman agreements daw na tatanggalin natin yung Sierra Madre niyan. Di ba? Well, there's no agreement such as that. And I'm glad that the president has confirmed that, because we don't want mumbo-jumbo, eto. So this is the statement by President Marcos. No agreement to remove BRP Sierra Madre from Ayungin Shoal, sabi niya. If ever there were some by you know who, previous administration, it's not gonna happen, right? So that's good. But that's, again, bare minimum. Necessary but not sufficient. We have to push this to the next level. We have to really check some options, serious options, including getting help from our allies to improve our facilities on the ground. Kasi kawawa yung troops natin. And please lang, stop saying this nonsense about we don't have money, we don't have funds, all of those things. Because we do have funds if we know how to prioritize. And we do have funds if we know, what I'm saying, how to cut corruption. I mean, more than 700 billion pesos of corruption annually based on some data of our own government a few years back. Good luck na lang yan. So there's the money. It's a question of prioritization. It's also a question of shedding light. Napansin ko yung response ng tao nung pinost natin yung mga pictures via the New York Times. Really, really striking pictures of how horrible the situation is on the ground. No, I know there was a documentary by my former home, GMA Network. Pero kulang eh. We have to keep on hammering this. We have to keep on reminding this. And dun sa mga ka-unity, no, this was not pointed at Marcos per se. This is just pointed at every Filipino president in recent memory, or people saying that wala tayong pera, we cannot afford. That's nonsense. We have more than enough money to have the bare minimum. And the problem is that even the bare minimum, yun ang wala tayo ngayon. And this is unacceptable. No one is gonna take us seriously, including our allies, if we keep on doing this. Parang squatter lang tayo sa sarili natin bakuran. This is unacceptable. And this is something that has to be highlighted over and over and again because we have to pressure authorities to stand their ground, do the right thing, at kawawa naman yung mga ating mga sundalo. They deserve way better than this. Hindi ko na alam dun sa mga armored Land Cruiser, yung mga ganyan. But, definitely, they deserve better than this, diba? At sana naman may mga anti-tetano, mga ganyan na medication dyan. Kasi grabe naman, visual ano pa lang, medyo, too much. Alright, thank you very much again dun sa lahat ng mga nag-comments, people who made suggestions. I appreciate it. Sana naman magpakabait kayo. Ay, confidential funds should be all allocated, develop, and fortify the West Philippine Sea. Sabi ni Busy Me. Thank you, sir, for joining us, even if busy ka. Ayan, yun naman, nagpo-point naman na, ayan na, mga nagbubuli na dyan. Alright, thank you very much sa mga ka-spacers natin. Thank you for that. If there's no question, thank you. Thank you, I really appreciate this. Let's continue this conversation. Thank you rin dito sa ating mga supporters sa... ano yung mga tanong nyo dyan? Wala na, pagod na. Ayan, Brunei. Si nag-comments. Hindi, yung Brunei, technically, there are some features that falls within their exclusive economic zone. Especially, may overlap sila with Malaysia. But they're not pursuing it kasi ayaw nila na away. Mayaman na sila, hindi na kailangan na away. Or they don't feel it's worth the fight. But hindi naman tayo Brunei. We're larger than all other claimants except China in terms of population. We're even bigger than Vietnam. So, wala tayong excuse dyan. So, thank you very much again kay Cook Jihan for your... Well, thank you too for your appreciation kay Madrigal Hia. Thank you, Heya. Thank you kay Ma'am Jocelyn Lumbre as always, kay Riza Oraya, kay Edna Agustin, Mira Minalov. Ayan. Yeah, exactly. Like we're just here to say may mandato tayo to allocate more and more funds to defense acquisition for minimum deterrence capability development. May pera tayo if we really know how to prioritize. And pangatlo, we have to justify. Intelligence funds is okay if it goes to security agencies and those who are really, really directly in charge of national security. And sa pagkaalam natin, kulang talagang nakakuha nila. I heard some really crazy small amount going to the Philippine Coast Guard, for instance. And sobrang limitado yung kakayahan ng Philippine Coast Guard, for instance, beyond the West Philippines. In fact, West Philippines pa lang, hirap na tayo. So, yun lang sana. Because in theory, all departments can say entwined with national security ang kanilang ginagawa. Alright? On that note, thank you very much and I hope we can catch up soon. Salamat din